News user summarizes some news that comes from various countries around the world. Biden urges Americans to follow his example by getting the new COVID-19 vaccine. On Tuesday, October 25th, U.S. President Joe Biden will receive the most recent COVID-19 vaccination and encourage more people to do the same, according to a statement from White House spokesman Kevin Munoz on Sunday. Through the end of last week, only 20 million Americans had received the new COVID-19 vaccine. Karine Jean-Pierre, a spokeswoman for the White House, said on Thursday that it was insufficient. She urged everyone to take action and have their current vaccination as soon as possible. Last week the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reported the revised vaccine had been administered to 5 million Americans over the course of the previous week, marking the highest weekly rise since the autumn immunization program's inception and an increase of roughly 40% from the week before. The revised COVID-19 vaccines, created to combat the circulating BA, were first distributed in the U.S. in September. 4 and BA. The original strain of the virus and its 5 subvariants. In July, Biden tested positive for COVID-19 with few symptoms and in a situation known as a rebound infection, which affects a small proportion of patients who take the antiviral medication Paxlovid. He completed his more than 2 weeks of isolation in the White House in August after 2 negative tests. Following a news presenter's plea for children to be drowned, Ukraine asks for a global ban on Russia's arty. Following a presenter's comment that Ukrainian youngsters who perceived Russians as occupiers under the Soviet Union should have been drowned, Ukraine on Sunday, October 23, denounced the Russian state-controlled RT media channel as an instigator of genocide. Presenter Anton Krasovsky of RT claimed in a show that aired last week that kids who criticized Russia should have been thrown straight into a river with a high current. Krasovsky, a pro-war commentator on Russian television who has been sanctioned by the EU, was responding to an account by Russian science fiction author Sergei Lukyanenko about how, during his first visit to Ukraine in the 1980s, kids told him they would live better lives if Moscow didn't occupy their nation. Krasovsky replied they ought to have perished in the Tisina River. Some text goes here. Just drown those children, drown them. He added that they could also be burned after being forced into shelters. In a brief excerpt of the interview that was posted on social media, Krasovsky also laughed at claims that Russian invaders had sexually assaulted elderly Ukrainian ladies. Dmytro Kuleba, the foreign minister of Ukraine, tweeted a link to a segment from the interview with the statement governments which have still not banned RT must watch this excerpt. Some text goes here. Aggressive genocide incitement, we will put this person on trial for it, which has nothing to do with freedom of speech. Ban RT worldwide, Kuleba added. The Kremlin has a strong grip on Russian state television, which has actively supported its invasion of Ukraine. Presenters frequently refuted allegations of Russian war crimes, and several of them used the opportunity to urge Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, to approach the invasion with even greater vigor. The Kremlin disputes that its troops in Ukraine have committed war crimes. Brazilian politician surrenders after throwing grenade at policeman while resisting arrest. Rio de Janeiro, Brazilian politician Roberto Jefferson surrendered early Sunday, October 23, evening after wounding 2 policemen while resisting arrest ordered by the country's Supreme Court. President Jair Bolsonaro tried to distance himself from his ally, posting a video on social media after his arrest, saying someone that fires at policemen should be treated as a criminal. The former lawmaker threw a grenade, and the shrapnel struck 2 officers. Both were taken to the hospital and later released, according to the statement. In a video posted on social media on Sunday morning, the congressman showed an image of federal police officers arriving at his house, and later admitted in another video that he had aimed at the police car but not at the officers. Supreme Court Justice Alexander Morris had ordered Jefferson to be taken to jail after the former congressman and president of PTB political party released a tape offending Justice Carmen Lucia, due to decisions she made related to the presidential elections. In his decision, Morris said Jefferson did not comply to conditions to his house arrest. Jefferson was already under investigation for the alleged involvement in producing fake news, and on Friday released statements offending Justice Carmen Lucia, who had decided to transfer part of Bolsonaro's airtime to presidential candidate and former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva after the leftist complained about offenses in the adversary's political ads. Randolph Rodriguez and Elysion Gama, two opposition senators, urged the Supreme Court to penalize Jefferson for hurting Lucia. In anticipation of the presidential runoff next Sunday, political unrest has increased. Earlier, Bolsonaro tweeted his disapproval of Jefferson's remarks against the justice and his defiance of incarceration. Lula asserted that the police should immediately handle the situation and accused Bolsonaro of escalating political violence. After being attacked, Salman Rushdie reportedly lost vision in one eye. After being attacked on stage at a literary event in western New York in August, Salman Rushdie lost the sight in one eye and the use of one hand, according to his agent. In an interview with the Spanish newspaper El País, Andrew Wiley, who represents literary greats including Saul Bellow and Roberto Bolaño, highlighted the severity of the injuries Rushdie sustained in the brutal attack. Wiley called the author's injuries deep and mentioned that one of the author's eyes had lost its vision. He has 3 significant injuries to his neck. The nerves in his arm were severed, leaving him the use of one hand. He also has another 15 or so wounds in his torso and chest. The 75-year-old author of the Satanic Verses was allegedly stabbed in the neck and torso by a 24-year-old New Jersey man just before Rushdie was scheduled to deliver a lecture at Chautauqua Institution, a retreat located about 19 kilometers from Lake Erie. The agent declined to comment on whether Rushdie was still hospitalized more than 2 months later. According to Wiley at the time, the novelist was taken to the hospital right away after the attack left him with serious wounds, including nerve damage in his arm, injury to his liver, and the potential loss of an eye. The attack took place 33 years after Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, the supreme leader of Iran at the time, called on Muslims to execute Rushdie a few months after the Satanic Verses was released in a fatwa, or religious edict. Some Muslims considered the book's references to the Prophet Muhammad to be disrespectful. Rushdie, who spent 9 years hiding under the protection of the British police and was born in India to a Muslim Kashmiri family, has lived with a price on his head. The multi-million-dollar prize on Rushdie's head kept rising, and the fatwa was never withdrawn even as Iran's pro-reform administration under President Mohammad Khatami distanced itself from it in the late 1990s. The supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, Khomeini's successor, was banned from Twitter in 2019 for declaring the fatwa on Rushdie to be irrevocable. The suspect in the assault on the novelist has entered a not guilty plea to counts of assault and second-degree attempted murder. In a jail in western New York, he is being detained without bail. As severe rains lash the east of Australia, the flood disaster enters its third week. Sydney, after a weekend of heavy rainfall, already flooded cities in Australia's east were on high alert on Monday, October 24. Authorities warned that a chaotic weather system might last until later this week and cause further riverbank bursts. As the fourth flooding disaster of the year in the east enters its third week, thousands of homes and farms over a large section of New South Wales and Victoria, Australia's two most populous states, have been submerged. Additionally, 5 people in the nation have lost their lives. As of Monday morning, there were still about 200 flood warnings in effect in both states, with 132 of them in New South Wales. Some text goes here: incredible flood warnings are being issued. Flooding is occurring in a large number of rivers from southern Queensland all the way up to northern Victoria. Dean Naramore, a forecaster for the Bureau of Meteorology, said. After up to 200 millimeters of heavy rain fell over the weekend, residents of Lismore, a town of 77,000 people located 700 kilometers north of Sydney, who had already been ravaged by flooding in March, feared yet another flood. Despite the cancellation of a severe weather warning on Monday, the area remains on flood watch. Numerous agricultural areas have suffered significant effects, notably Moree, where the local river reached near historic flooding levels. Moray Mayor Mark Johnson told ABC News that the destruction was horrendous and widespread. Horrendous and widespread, said the farmer. As they looked for a woman who was allegedly trying to flee a car that was apparently caught in floodwaters close to the town of Mudgee, emergency personnel warned locals not to drive on flooded roadways. Residents of Echuca, in the neighboring state of Victoria, are still protected by a dirt levee built last week as the Murray River, Australia's longest river, approached a nearly 30-year high. A day before the release of the national budget, the federal government said on Monday that it will set aside $577 million Australian dollars, $370 million US dollars, to expedite the processing of relief payments.